The United States Embassy is officially open in Jerusalem. And oh my goodness, the backlash, 60 dead as violent clashes happen at the Israeli wall. We'll talk about that and a lot more. I'm Randall Terry. This is Voice of Resistance. Welcome to the program, friend. President Trump honored his word. He, like almost every presidential candidate for almost 40 years, said that he would move the American capital from Tel Aviv, the American embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. And he did it. This has the Muslim world enraged. Turkey, who is a part of NATO, remember, Turkey has said that the United States is no longer a mediator. It has become a part of the problem. Turkey has thrown out the Israeli ambassador. This is the beginning of a wave of political and perhaps protests, for sure protests, and perhaps violent protests that are going to be upon us for the next few days and probably for the next few weeks. It should die down, but let's not get to that yet. Jerusalem, when Israel became a state in 1948, Jerusalem was a divided city. And the border of Jordan came all the way up to and including part of Jerusalem. So when you hear people talk about the West Bank and you look at a map, you're like, well, that's on the east side of Jerusalem. I don't get it. It's because it was the West Bank of Jordan. It was the West Bank of the Jordan River. Look at this map. You see the Jordan River there, and then you can see it comes up to, if you could see a topographical map, you could see that it's an uphill climb all the way to the city of Jerusalem. That was the West Bank of Jordan. And it has maintained that name ever since Israel captured the West Bank from the Jordanians in, I believe it was the Six-Day War. So, the President Trump honored his commitment. Jerusalem has been the historic capital of Israel since the times of David. Obviously, prior to the Roman conquest of the world, the Jews lost control of the city, and the last major battle to retake Jerusalem for the Jews to control it happened during, if my memory is correct, during Hadrian's reign. Hadrian was a pagan, demon-possessed, evil man, and he wanted to put a temple to Jupiter or Zeus or something up on top of the Temple Mount, where Solomon's temple had been destroyed. And the Jews said, we're not going to have any of that. It was bloody conflicts. The Jews ultimately lost, but the pagan temple was never built. So the Jews have controlled Jerusalem in this era for decades, and they have maintained that it is their capital. And the United States basically said, we have to recognize the de facto reality. President Trump was not there. He sent his daughter, Ivanka, and son-in-law, Jared Kushner, to be there as the representatives and stand in front of the plaque, taking selfies with the Prime Minister of Israel. And while this was going on, and so this was a great day for Israel. You have to understand that Israel is America's #1 ally in the Middle East region. Really and truly, no, it doesn't matter what party is in control of Washington, D.C., America is not going to let Israel be overrun. Now, during an Obama administration, clearly Obama was going to let Israel's enemies obtain nuclear weapons, which could ultimately lead to Israel being wiped off the map. And there is reason to suspect that Obama had a streak of anti-Semitism in him. That would be due to his Muslim upbringing. Islam is inherently anti-Semitic, inherently anti-Semitic. And I'll explain more about that in a minute. But President Trump did what others said they would do, but never did. He kept his word. And in spite of all that's going on around him, to take a moment to praise our president, he's still, inch by inch, foot by foot, he is still accomplishing what he promised the voters he would do. He said he would do what he could to protect our borders. He's moving forward. He said he would deal with trade deals that are unfair to the Americans. He's doing it. He said that he would move the American embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. He did it. When we come back, we're going to talk about the violent clashes that were happening at the border. And this was, in many ways, a public relations bonanza for Hamas and other Muslim terrorists. Trust me, it was a win-win for them. Whether they were successful in breaking through the wall and flooding hundreds or thousands of people into Israel, or whether they were killed in the process, it was a public relations win for them. Don't go away. Today, many so-called Christian intellectuals believe that the God of evolution used billions of years of death and destruction to evolve the bodies of the first human beings. Then, they simply declare the theory of evolution as fact to justify their unproven scientific fallacies. By the grace of God, more and more Catholics are rejecting this modern-day mythology in favor of the traditional doctrine of creation, as recorded by the Bible, and believed and taught by all the fathers and doctors of the Church. To find out how sound theology and natural science confirm the sacred history of Genesis, visit the Colby Center for the Study of Creation, and be sure to check out our bookstore, which has titles like I Have Spoken to You from Heaven, A Catholic Defense of Creation in 6 Days, and A Catholic Assessment of Evolutionary Theory. That's the Colby Center for the Study of Creation. Muhammad, the founder of Islam, said, the end would not come until the Muslims fight the Jews, and a rock or a tree would say, O Muslim, there is a Jew hiding behind me, come and kill him. Why? Why this intense hatred of the Jews? Because when Muhammad moved from Mecca to Medina, he preached publicly for about 10 years in Mecca, and then he moved to Medina. Medina had a huge, thriving Jewish population. Muhammad prayed toward Jerusalem. He observed the same fasts as Jews. He observed the same dietary laws as Jews. And he went to them and said, I'm your prophet. I'm following in the line of Moses. And they laughed. They scoffed. And he couldn't read and write. So he would tell stories and he would get it wrong, which only made the Jews laugh harder. And then they began to mock him and to pick apart his stories and to show that he was not a prophet. Well, this enraged Muhammad. It made him crazy with rage. And ultimately, he was able to drive all of the Jewish tribes that were in Medina out. Some he let live. He took all of their property, their real estate. One batch of people, he said, you can take one camel for every 3 people, and you can take what you can carry. The Banu Qurayza, he killed all their men from puberty to old age. Any boy who reached puberty, they would actually check to see if the child was in puberty. And they would kill. They decapitated all the men. They took all the women as sex slaves, all the children as slaves, and took all of their real estate and all of their chattel goods. Then he went on to purge all of Saudi Arabia of Jews, except for one small spot. But even then, he said to them, I'm going to let you stay as sharecroppers, but at any point we can tell you to leave. And at his death, that's what happened, because he whispered to, I believe, Abu Bakr, and he said, do not leave 2 religions on the Arabian Peninsula. And so they drove off the remaining Jews so that Arabia would be 100% Muslim. That's how far back the anti-Semitism goes in Islam. When Muhammad and his men took the city of Khaybar, and Muhammad took a sex slave from one of the elders, after he tortured that elder with fire on his chest to find money, when he took Khaybar, when he was approaching Khaybar, Ali, his son-in-law, said, on what basis do I fight these people? It was a surprise attack. There was no quarrel going on. It was just a complete surprise attack. Muhammad said, fight them until they testify that there is no God but Allah and Muhammad is his messenger. Now you might wonder why Muslim terrorists think that when they terrorize a city or terrorize a region, that it's going to result in people converting. It's because that's what Muhammad practiced in his day. Ali became the fourth caliph, the fourth successor. Ali was married to Muhammad's daughter, Fatima. Muhammad told Ali, fight against them until they testify that there is no God but Allah and that Muhammad is his messenger. Muhammad knew that the Jews were not going to convert. So he killed their men, seized their property, drove a few of them off. And that was a part of the many links in the chain, the bondage chain of anti-Semitism that is inherent in Islam against Jews. So the Jews are not going to stand for, or rather the Muslim terrorists are not going to stand peacefully by while Jerusalem is recognized by America as the capital of Israel. Jerusalem to Muslims is called Al-Quds. It is the third holiest site. The Temple Mount is the third holiest site in Islam because Mecca is number one because that's where the Kaaba is. Medina is number two because that's where Muhammad went when he fled Mecca and really got Islam established. And the third holiest site is Jerusalem, the Temple Mount, precisely because in Islamic lore, or really Islamic orthodoxy, Muhammad said that he had a night flight, that an angel cut open his chest, washed his heart, and then they put him on a horse named Barak, believe it or not. Yes, the same as our former president. And the horse flew with him on his back to Jerusalem, and then Muhammad from the Temple Mount ascended through 7 layers of the heavens until he met with God himself. That's a part of Muslim orthodoxy. And so because of that, Muslims believe that they have a right to the total control of Jerusalem. And many Muslims believe without having any Jews present. So Jewish authorities have allowed Muslims to maintain control of the top of the Temple Mount where the Dome of the Rock is because it's easier to let them have it than it is to fight over it. But there are people who believe that the Solomon's Temple will be rebuilt on top of the Temple Mount and the Dome of the Rock has got to go. I am not among them, but that is why this constant quarreling happens over the city of Jerusalem. I took too long on this. I've got to tell you about the clashes and why it was a public relations boom for Hamas. Don't go away. Have Muslim terrorists hijacked the peaceful religion of Islam? Or is there more to the story? The answer lies in the life of one man, Muhammad, the founder of Islam. Muslim terrorists see themselves inside a 1,400-year-old story, a narrative that focuses on specific events in the life of Muhammad. We are going to look at Muhammad's life using their most sacred literature. We will look at Muhammad at the Battle of Badr. We'll see him deal with those who mock him. We'll see the times when he used deception. We'll witness Muhammad's anti-Semitism. And yes, we will discuss Muhammad and his teachings concerning sex, slavery, and jihad. Friend, if you want to understand Islamic terrorism, get this series today. Welcome back to the program, friend. If you've been watching the news over the past couple of days, you have seen some footage of clashes at the Israel-Palestinian Authority border. The Jews have a fence to keep out anyone who would try and sneak in and launch a terrorist attack. And the fence works. The Muslim terrorists have at points dug tunnels underneath it and successfully infiltrated Israel. But for the most part, the wall is doing its job. So some 20,000, 30,000, 35,000, depends on what news story you read, on Sunday and Monday rushed towards the fence at various locations. And the footage that we've been seeing is where there was media. But from all that I've seen, what I'm detecting is that the Muslim terrorists were using civilians who wanted to just protest to approach the fence en masse to distract Israeli defense forces. And then at other points along the wall, they approached with bombs. Israel claims that 24 of the people that were killed were Muslim terrorists, and that most of those killed were known Muslim terrorists, and that most of those killed were in the process of trying to put detonation devices at various points of the wall. Their goal was to breach the wall and then have people pour through. And obviously the Israeli Defense Forces could not capture everybody as they ran through. And so they would get a handful of terrorists inside who would then proceed to go and commit more acts of terrorism. So the Israeli Defense Forces used lethal force at those points. That's why when you're watching this footage, you see tear gas coming in, and you see people running, and you see some people injured on the ground, but you're not hearing Israeli gunfire. The Jews were not shooting into a crowd like the British did in India during the days of Mahatma Gandhi. Okay, that's not what was happening. Snipers were deliberately killing known Muslim terrorists who were bringing bombs to the wall to blow holes in the wall so that other Muslim terrorists could get into Israel and commit acts of terrorism. So under those circumstances, the reaction of the Jews was reasonable. It was proportional force. Now, this is a gold mine for Hamas on public relations and for other Muslim terrorists. Iran burned an American flag. Iranian politicians burned an American flag. Or as I mentioned earlier in the show, Turkey kicked out the Israeli ambassador. Turkey, remember, a part of NATO, is now openly criticizing America. And Amnesty International said that these killings were a horrible outrage, a grave human rights violation. Well, none of us have seen the footage, at least as of this recording. None of us have seen any footage of the people who were killed and what they were doing. We've seen footage of thousands and thousands of people rushing the fence, but they're not being mowed down. The people who were killed by snipers. Snipers who are trained to take out one person, one specific person at a time. Nevertheless, Hamas is crying out what victims they are and what monsters the Israelis are and what a horrible outrage against human rights this is. So you have to understand the way these people think. They wanted dead people. Hamas wanted dead people. If the protests had remained peaceful, I mean, that's a nice little news story, and thousands of peaceful protesters gathered at the Palestinian Authority Israeli border to protest the Jerusalem, or the capital being, the embassy being moved from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. All right, it's a soundbite and it goes away. But getting reports about Jews killing unarmed people that were protesting, that makes it so you turn world opinion against the Jews. There was an effort to get the Security Council at the UN to review the killings at the Gaza Strip, and America put the kibosh on that. Nevertheless, this is a horrible black eye for Israel. Even if they did the right thing, which it appears to me thus far that they did, even if they did the right thing, it's a black eye for Israel. It's a public relations feel-good bonanza for Hamas. Obviously, we grieve for any innocent people that were killed, but my hunch is that most of the people who were killed were not innocent victims. They were terrorists on a mission to kill, and it cost them their life. And for those, I say good riddance. I'll be right back. What Would Mohammed Do? Islamic Terrorism Explained is the best movie series documentary ever produced on the life of Muhammad and Islam. How do I know? Because it's what critics are saying. John Moore, radio host and author, said, "I learned more from What Would Mohammed Do about Islam and Islamic terrorism than I've learned from everything I ever read and watched in my entire life." Best-selling author Dr. Bill Warner said, "What Would Mohammed Do is the best movie series, TV production on the life of Muhammad and Islamic terrorism that has ever been produced." Friends, this is what the experts are saying. No one has ever done what we've done. I encourage you to get 1, 2, 4 copies. Call 304-289-3700. That's 304-289-3700, or order it at the address or the website that you see on the screen. Friend, we have a series that will help you and those you love to have an impact on this country. It's called Insurrecta Nex. That's Latin for revolution against the killing of innocent people. This is the history, the philosophy, and the theology of social revolution in America. We look at the Stamp Act, the Boston Tea Party, the abolition of slavery, the abolition of child labor, women's voting rights, the civil rights movement. All of them have this in common: courage, sacrifice, dedication, and in-your-face tactics and rhetoric. That's one of the reasons that we've been losing the culture wars the last 40 years, is because the bad guys are using these tactics and we aren't. We will send you this 14-part TV series along with these manuals for students, a teacher's facilitator guide for only $40. Go to 304-289-3700, 304-289-3700. Welcome back to the program, friend. In news that is somewhat comical regarding Mitt Romney, who I often believe is a joke, not as a businessman, but intellectually, religiously. I've been told he's a nice man, so good for him. But he's not a theologian, okay? And he was publicly complaining that President Trump tapped Baptist pastor Robert Jeffries to speak at the opening of the American embassy in Jerusalem. This is the tweet. Forgive me for laughing, but it's so funny. Put the tweet up there. This is what Romney said. Robert Jeffries says, "You can't be saved by being a Jew, and Mormonism is a heresy from the pit of hell." He said the same thing about Islam. "Such a religious bigot should not be given the prayer that opens the United States Embassy in Jerusalem." Now, when I heard that Romney was angry, I thought, at first I didn't know who the pastor was. I mean, I know the man, but I just heard Romney really is upset about some pastor. Oh, who is it? Who's this religious bigot? Pastor Jeffries is a good guy. So Pastor Jeffries responded basically saying, look, Orthodox Christians have believed that you're only saved through faith in Jesus Christ really since the dawn of the church. Whether you're Jewish or Gentile, doesn't matter. We need faith in Jesus Christ to be redeemed, faith in his blood. And Mormonism being a heresy, well, that's pretty much been the Christian position since Joseph Smith had his crazy dreams and found his fake tablets from the angel Moroni. And Islam being from the pit of hell or being evil, you would have to be a blind moron or someone who's self-induced blindness to think that Islam is not a threat. So I don't know if Romney did this because he's running for Senate in a Mormon state and he had to have his moment in the sun where he reproached Pastor Jeffries. But I hate to tell you this, Mr. Romney. I say it with all respect, because if you and I could fight together to save a baby's life that was drowning, I would fight side by side with you. If we had to stand against Islamic terrorism side by side, I would stand with you, even though you haven't figured out that Islam wants to destroy you. So in that light, I don't usually get into denominational quarrels, and I don't get into what cults are cults. When you deny the divinity of Jesus Christ, you're a cult. You're a heresy. I mean, that's the simple Christian position. If you want to say you don't like the Christian position, that's fine. But it's comical because you stepped in it, Mr. Romney. He's not a religious bigot. He's an Orthodox Christian, and he's got the guts to say the truth publicly. So I applaud President Trump for picking Pastor Jeffries, and I wish that Romney had been elected president, because it would have been better to have him than to have Barack Obama. But since those days are behind us, I wish Mr. Romney well in Utah and in the U.S. Senate from Utah, and I hope that he embraces the Christian position that abortion is murder and that it's wrong to kill a baby from the moment of conception, not the Mormon position, which is after implantation. Big difference, people. I've got to go. Talk to you Thursday. Bye for now.